Good morning. My name is Linda Pratt, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Welcome to our service. Unitarian Universalism encourages an open-ended search for meaning in life and a commitment to asking our values to shape our actions. We are a pluralistic religion that draws wisdom from many sources. We welcome all people into our community of whatever age, race, class, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. We especially welcome those of you who may be worshiping with us for the first time. We invite you to join us after service downstairs for coffee and snacks so that we can get to know each other better. Guests are welcome to participate in any activities in our community. If you would like more information about this congregation, or if you have any questions, please ask any board member or Reverend Patrick Price when he is present. Thank you.
Our spotlight today is me, and it is to confess to an error that was in the newsletter. So I did, as chair of the board, let the congregation know that we did offer our contract to Reverend Patrick, and then I gave some dates that are not correct. And thank you for the thousands that let me know. I had assumed incorrectly that Reverend Patrick would be here the first week of August. But the service is being done by that environmental group from Iowa City that was here a year or so ago. We really enjoyed. They are coming to do the service, I think it's August 5th. So Reverend Patrick will not be at the service that day, but he's coming later in the month. So wanted to correct that and apologize for assuming, because you know what that does. I'm Alice Martin, a member of the Pastoral Care Team and chairperson of the board. I want to start by thanking Gates always for setting the mood and filling in the blanks. For the sound booth team, I see Erica's head and Steve and others who contribute, because I may lead this service, but certainly the puzzles of the jigsaw are those components as well. So let's give them a thank you. Our theme this month has been stories. And the question we're going to focus on today is, where do our stories come from? Where do they begin? A usual answer would consist of, well, I tell a story because I need to connect, or I need to hear and be educated, informed through stories. I want to be seen and I want to be heard. I want to lighten the mood. I want to be funny. I want to make a point. But is there something more than just those objective things? That a story is just not a footnote in a family story, a snapshot of a specific moment in time? Is it just an isolated event with no connection or meaning to anything, but just that time? Or are all stories connected to something bigger than a separate moment in time? That our stories are a living testimony of a connection to each other. That our story began billions of years ago, and how we live our story affects the next billion years. That's an interesting thought, but it's somewhat frightening, for that means how I choose to live my life now, the story I leave behind, will affect the stories of millions of people who come after me. That's scary. How we live our story maybe as well depends upon what story we believe brought us into being. I will speculate throughout this reflection later in the service that suggests possibilities, wonders at what can be, but one thing I do question is, why are we all here? Those on YouTube, in this sanctuary, in a 7 billion year story, we are all here now. Is that a random thing? Is there a purpose to it? How in the world did that happen? Look at each other when you greet each other soon. I mean, like, we're part of a 7 billion year story. Amazing. To truly comprehend that is trying to capture the wind in your hand. And I've been trying to do that all week as I try to hear my own question. In my reflection later, you'll know if I was able to contain the wind, or if it simply leaves us with another question. We will now light the chalice. We come together every week, bound not by a creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods. Yet we are drawn together by a belief that we who are in the world, who we are together, matters.
We light this chalice together in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change the world.
Please rise as you are willing and able of spirit to sing our opening hymn, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time, page 350. Boom. In the spirit of now knowing each other for 7 billion years, let us rise and greet each other for 1 or 2 minutes, and I will ring the chime when complete. This is one of my favorite things to do.
Good morning. Good morning. I might be a little long-winded today, and I apologize for that, but the story that I chose is a story that this day, when I read it, I kind of pick apart a different part of it to see what it is. Alice has asked the questions, where do stories come from? And I had read this story by this author who also had another quote that said, "The purpose of the storyteller is not to tell you what to think, but to give you questions to think upon." And I like stories that I can reevaluate and go back and look and say, well, what is he trying to talk about there? What's going on here? And the story is a little long-winded, and you may not like where it ends, but I'm going to tell it. And the story by Brandon Sanderson is called The Story of the Dragon and the Dog. One day, a dog saw a dragon flying overhead, and the dog marveled, as one might expect. He had never seen anything so majestic or so grand. The dragon soared in the sky, shimmering with iridescent colors in the sunlight, and when it curved around to pass above the dog, it called out a mighty challenge, demanding in the human tongue that all acknowledge its beauty. And the dog watched this from the top of the hill. Now, he wasn't a particularly large dog, even breed. He was white and brown spots with blobby ears, and no specific breed, no lineage, and small enough that even the other dogs often mocked him. It was a common variety of a common species, of a common animal that most people would rightfully ignore. But when this dog stared at the dragon and heard his mighty boast, he came to a realization. Today, he had encountered something he always wished for but had never known. Today, he had seen perfection, and it had presented him with a goal. Today, nothing else mattered, for he was going to become a dragon. The dog sat upon that hilltop for an entire night and day, staring and thinking and dreaming, and finally he returned to the farm to where he had lived among others of his kind. These farm dogs had all the jobs, chasing livestock, guarding the perimeter, but he was the smallest and was seldom given any duty whatsoever. Perhaps to another this would be liberating, but to him it had always been humiliating. And as any problems to overcome are merely just a set of smaller problems to overcome in sequence, he divided his goal of becoming a dragon into 3 steps. First, he would find a way to have colorful scales. Second, he would learn to speak the language of men. Third, he would learn to fly. The dog chose the scales first, as it seemed the easiest, and he wanted an easy victory. He knew that the farmer owned many seeds in a variety of many colors, and they were the shapes of little scales. But because he was not a thief, the dog would not take these, but he asked the other animals where the farmer stored the new ones. And it turns out that the farmer could make seeds by planting them in the ground, waiting for the plants to grow, and then taking more seeds from them to the stalks. Knowing this, that dog borrowed some seeds and did the same thing, accompanying the farmer's eldest son on his daily work. As the youth worked, the dog moved along beside him, digging holes for the seeds with his paws and planting them very carefully with his mouth. And it was an amusing scene to watch the dog work. The farmer's eldest son found the dog's actions quite amusing, then incredible as the dog went out each day gripping the water can in his teeth. The little dog watered each seed just as the farmer did. He learned to weed and fertilize, and eventually the dog was rewarded with his own small crop of colorful seeds. Now, after replacing what he had borrowed from the farmer, the dog got himself wet and rolled in the seeds, sticking them all over his body, and then he presented himself to the other dogs. "Do you admire my wonderful new scales?" he said to his fellow animals. "Do I not look like a dragon?" And they, in turn, laughed at him. "Oh, those are not scales," they said. "You look stupid and silly. Go back to being a dog." The dog slunk away, feeling foolish and hurt. He had failed at his first task to even have scales like a dragon. The dog, however, was not daunted. Surely he could speak with the grand voice of a dragon, and they would all see. And so the dog spent his free time watching the children of the farm. There were 3, the eldest son who helped in the fields, the middle daughter who helped with the animals, and the toddler who was too young to help but was learning to speak. So they were all working in the yard. The farmer's wife, who was taller than the farmer, the youth, lanky and industrious, the daughter who would someday share her mother's height, and the baby who toddled around the yard, tended by all of them as they did their chores. Anyway, the dog figured the best way to learn the language of men was to study the youngest. So the dog played with the baby, stayed with him, and listened as he began to form words. The dog played with the daughter, too, to help her with her yard work. He soon found that he could understand her if he tried. But he could not form the words. He tried hard to speak as he did, but his mouth could not make that kind of speech. His tongue did not work like the human tongue. Eventually, while watching the tall daughter, he noticed that she could make words of the humans. The dog was overjoyed by this, and it was a way to speak without having a human tongue. The dog joined her at the table where she studied, inspecting the letters she made. He failed many times, but eventually he learned to scratch letters in the dirt for himself. The farmer and his family thought this was an amazing trick. The dog was sure he had found a way to prove that he was on his way to becoming a dragon. He returned to the other dogs in the field and showed them his writing abilities by writing their names in the dirt. They, however, could not read the words. When the dog explained what he was writing, they laughed. "Well, this is not loud and majestic voice of a dragon," the dog scolded. "This is speaking quietly. Nobody can hear it. You look silly and stupid. Go back to being a dog." And they left the dog to stare at his writing. As the rain began to fall, washing the words away, he realized that they were correct. He had failed to speak with the proud and powerful voice of a dragon. But there was still hope. If the dog could just fly, if he could achieve this feat, the dogs would have to acknowledge his transformation. The task seemed even harder than the previous two, but however, the dog had seen a curious device in the barn. The farmer would tie bays of hay to the rope and then rise and lower them using a pulley system in the rafters. This was essentially flying, was it not? The bales of hay soared into the air, and so the dog practiced pulling on the rope himself. And he learned the mechanics of the device. He found that the pulley could be balanced with a weight on the other side, which were made of bales to lower or raise safely. The dog took his leash and tied it around him to make a harness, like the ones that wrapped the bales of hay. Then he tied a sack slightly lighter than he was to the rope, creating a weight to balance him. And after using his mouth to tie the ropes into a harness, he climbed on top of the barn's loft and called for the other dogs to come in. And when they arrived, he leaped gracefully off the loft, and it had worked. The dog lowered down slowly, striking a magnificent pose in the air. He was flying. He soared like the dragon had. He felt the air around him and knew the sensation of being high up with everything below. When he landed, he felt so proud and so free. And the other dogs laughed. They laughed the loudest they had ever laughed. "Well, that is not flying like a dragon. You fell slowly. You look so stupid and silly. Go back to being a dog." This, at long last, crushed the dog's hopes. He realized the truth. A dog like him simply could not become a dragon. He was too small. He was too quiet. He was too silly. But what was that? The dog looked up confused. He heard noises, sudden shouting, yells, panic. The dog raced out to the barn to find the farmer and his family huddled around the small farmyard well, which was barely wide enough for even the bucket. The dog put his paws on the edge of the well and looked down far below, and in the depths and the deep darkness of the hole, he heard crying and splashing. A pitiful, gurgling cry was barely audible over the splashing. The littlest child of the farmer and his wife had fallen into the well and was drowning. The family screamed and wept. There was nothing to be done. Or was there? In a flash, the dog knew what to do. He bit the bucket off of the well's rope, and then he had the eldest son tie the rope in his harness. He wrote, "Lower me," in the dirt, and then hopped up onto the rim of the well. Finally, he threw himself into the well as the farmer grabbed the crank. Lowered down on the rope, the dog flew into the darkness. He found the baby well the way underwater, but shoved his snout in and took hold of the baby's cloth in his teeth. A short time later, the family pulled him back up, and the dog appeared, holding the littlest child, wet, crying, but very much alive. That night, the family set a place for the little dog at their table and gave him a sweater to keep him warm. His name was written across it with the letters that he could read. They served a feast with the food the dog had helped grow. They gave him some cake celebrating the birthday of the child whose life he had just saved. And that night it rained. The other dogs who slept outside in the cold barn, which leaked, but the little dog snuggled in the warm bed beside the fire, hugged by the farmer's children, his belly full. And as he did, the dog sadly thought to himself, "I could not become a dragon. I am an utter and complete failure."
Good morning. I'm Barbara Thompson, a member of the Pastoral Care Ministry team. As we gather together, we pause to reflect on what lies in our hearts. In this time of sharing, we take a moment to recognize our personal joys and sorrows, and to read from the book of Joys and Sorrows, those personal life events you've chosen to share with us. A couple of entries today. Such a joy to share in the celebration of life of longtime member Jackie Crouch and her family yesterday. And from the Crouch family, much gratitude to all the UUs for assisting in the celebration of life for our mom, Jackie, exceeding all of our expectations. Did we have anything online this morning? Thank you. Let us become aware of the energy that brings us together in beloved community as we share a time of silent meditation. May we open our minds and hearts to a place of quiet, to a silent prayer for the healing of pain and the comfort of love. For what has been shared and for what remains in the quiet sanctuary of our hearts, we are grateful. We close our meditation with the words of Sheena Pugh. Sometimes things don't go, after all, from bad to worse. Some years, muscadel faces down frost. Green thrives. The crops don't fail. Sometimes a man aims high and all goes well. A people sometimes will step back from war, elect an honest man, decide they care enough that they can't leave some stranger poor. Some men become what they were born to be. Sometimes our best efforts do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen to you.
During our following period of meditation, feel free to come forward to light candles as we share our moments of silent reflection, meditation, or prayer. This congregation is alive because of our financial contributions that we will now take a moment to consider our treasures, our gifts, and our treasures. This month's Share the Plate is with the, we're sharing the plate with Citizens Alliance of Tenants through the Quad Cities Interfaith. It will be specifically earmarked for the tenants of the building that collapsed in Davenport in May of 2023. Please give as generously as you can. What an introduction. I'm going to relay two stories to you concerning the creation of the universe. The first one is one that we're all familiar with, that is firmly entrenched in our culture's system of belief. The second story, not so much. It is from one of these two stories that we will find the answer to our question. Where do our stories come from? Where do our stories begin? The first story is from the Christian Bible, told in the first 3 chapters of Genesis. Now, I was a Lutheran for many years, involved in religious education, and even went to seminary. I know this story well. I also know how this Christian story dictates the life story of those who believe it. Here is a brief synopsis from the creation story that many of us, many people in this culture, live their stories by. Listen to it well. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth had no form and everything was dark. So on the first day of creation, God commanded there to be light, and he separated the light, which now we call day, and darkness, which we now know as night. On the second day, God separated the waters that was everywhere above the dome and then beneath the dome. And through this, the sky was created. On the third day, God commanded those waters under the dome to separate, leaving dry land on earth to appear. And God saw all this was good, and then created all kinds of vegetation to grow in these dry places. On the fourth day, the stars were put into the sky to provide light for the earth, which included possibly our sun. On the fifth day, creatures of the sea were created and the birds to fly in the skies, and that was good too. On the sixth day, God made every kind of animal, bugs, reptiles, insects. Then he created humankind, giving them dominion over all that he had created, with instructions to be fruitful and multiply, to fill and subdue the earth. On the seventh day, God rested. It was a perfect place until a male and female messed things up in that Garden of Eden, bringing sin into the world. God kicked them out of this perfect world due to their insubordination, and a lot of our culture is a blueprint of appeasing this Creator to spend eternity with Him and the faithful followers of this way. So, a few things stood out for me as I read this creation story. God creates at the command, and it's the final product. Everything was created as we see it today, with no growth, no change. It is what it was, and it always will be what it is. There's no creativity, there's no growth, there's no expansion, no possibilities. Just obedience, loyalty, and strict rules to follow, and roles to play. Men, you are to labor in the fields, and women, you have to go through the pain of childbirth. The meaning and purpose of this universal story is to get through this life, proving your worth by obedience, so the next life will be spent in really another universe. Leaving that one there, here is our second story, and it's told by Matthew Fox, a defrocked priest from the Catholic Church, and it's entitled The Creation Story. Listen carefully to the story. You will hear where you come from, where your story began, and why you are here. This is my story, and this is your story. In the beginning was the gift, and the gift came and set its tent among us, first in the form of a fireball that burned unabated for thousands of years. It cooked in its immensely hot oven hadrons and leptons, long enough to give birth to the first atomic creatures, hydrogen and helium. From 1 billion years of stewing and stirring, the gifts of hydrogen and helium birthed galaxies, spinning, whirling, alive galaxies from which emerged trillions of stars, lights in the heavens and cosmic furnaces that made more gifts, multiplied through violent explosions, through creation of the billions of glowing stars. Gifts upon gifts, gifts birthing, gifts exploding, gifts imploding, emerging, gifts of light, gifts of darkness, cosmic gifts and subatomic gifts, all drifting and swirling, being born and dying in some vast secret of a plan, which was also a gift. From one of these supernova gifts emerged a unique gift to the universe, which later coming creatures would one day call their home, the Earth. Its biosphere was also a gift, wrapping it with beauty and dignity, and just the right protection from the sun's radiation and from the cosmic cold and eternal darkness. This gifted planet was set up as a jewel in its most exquisite setting. In this case, the exact distance of 100 million miles from its mother star, the sun. New gifts emerged, never seen in such forms in the universe. Rocks and oceans, continent, multicellular creatures, but moved by their own power. Life was born. Gifts that had taken the form of a fireball and helium, galaxies and stars, rocks and water, now took the form of life. Life, a new gift of the universe, a new gift in the universe. And what arose were flowers of multiple color and scent, trees standing upright, forests whose offering places to all manners of creeping and crawling things, of things that fly and sing, of things that swim and slither, of things that run on four legs, and eventually of things that stand and walk on two, with thumbs that move to make still more creativity, more gift-giving possible. This gift has been brought to us and dwells everywhere among us. To those who receive such manner of giving, all is promised. For they shall be called children of the gift, sons and daughters of grace, for all generations. I know I just look outside and I see this poem written in the wind. This creation story, based on science's best guess at this point, is a story of all things that we can see and not see, of all those in this sanctuary and those that are not. It is my story and is your story, and it is wonderfully, preciously perfect. And it is a part of the universe's story, and we are the gifts that it has delivered to life. When I first read this version long ago of Matthew Fox's creation, I instantly felt a connection to the universal story, for it is mine as well. The words Fox uses to relay the story of the universe are the words I can use to tell my story. I was born. I exploded out of the darkness of the womb into the light. My story contains periods of stability, as well as a stewing and stirring in my soul that brings forth new ideas, some which give birth to new paths, others which die right before my eyes. My life was imploded when my mother died at a young age. My life expanded when I married and brought forth 3 new lives into the world. My life collapsed upon my divorce, but a new way was found through the study of religious spiritualities. My life split apart when I abandoned Christianity, and it was formed and reconnected as I joined this congregation. My story contains all the endings and the new beginnings, all the dying, all the rebirthing of myself, all the light and darkness that is found in this story of creation. I realized as I pondered all of that I am a part of the essence of the universe that brought me into being. To live within its principles that has sustained itself for billions of years is my purpose and my meaning. And I know when I am aligned with the principles to which the universe offers us. I know the sense of peace and harmony, the awareness that I am connected to each thing of this world, a presence that's in the moments, accepting life as it is and not as I want it. I know when I am aligned with that, for I accept change, which is the bread and butter of the universe. I know that when I am community, just as trees show me the way as they breeze through the trees. I know when I can resolve conflicts, just as autumn gently gives way to winter. There is an acceptance of order that contains chaos, as when a tree falls, wiping out other trees that just happen to be in the way. I know I am aligned when I accept the patterns that must be accepted, because if there was no death, there would be no life. It is about relationships that strengthen us in connection, just as the sun is in relationship with the moon. These are the themes of the universe that has operated for billions of years. The universe has proven itself to me by the fact that I exist. I stand here today. The universe asks us to trust it time and time and time again, and to accept and to be with. Now, I also know when I am not aligned with the ways of the universe. It does happen, as it did this morning. I'm rushing around. I can't find the front sheet of my service. I can't find my shoes. Where did I put my coffee? And I'm rushing around, and I realized I had lost my glasses. So, furthering panic, forgetting all of my composure and my calm, I went into the bedroom, the last place I thought I'd had it, and I sat on the bed. And I found my glasses underneath me. Thankfully, they weren't broken. That was a moment where I paused and I started to laugh, because we do it to ourselves, as I had done this morning, taking over and not trusting that all would be well, as we are in community, with acceptance of each of us as we are. And here I am. The universe's story is our story, but it's our congregation's as well. Our congregation was brought forth over 150 years ago. Anne probably knows the exact time. Our congregation had a vision, it had a dream, and it was created by a community of people who heard it, who believed that the work of creation is ongoing, and wanted to be a part of its future. Our congregations from the beginning had to recreate itself many times. It had to change or become extinct. It had to learn that growth comes from change and embraced it. That conflict is healthy, but if left unattended, will implode upon itself. It had to learn that even the best laid plans go awry, and follow the unchosen path, because it leads to new opportunities. These episodes in our congregational story had twists and turns, swirlings and ever-changing circumstances, and they have happened periodically as they needed to happen. And from it, we still stand. We are in such a time, at this period of our story, brought about by so many things. COVID, Jay's resignation, a part-time interim that commutes. It has been brought to us not by any one thing, but by a call from the universe to grow, to redefine our purpose with commitment, to be the sons and daughters of the universe who carry the story of oneness, unity, and harmony to the next generation. To do this, we must follow the way of the universe. We need to implode, to explode, to be in darkness, find a new path, find the light, expand. We need to die and to be reborn. For that is the way, that is the truth, and there will be the light. In my opening statements, I asked two questions, and we attempted to answer them. Where do our stories come from? Where do our stories begin? The answer we have pondered and concluded is that they originate with the beginning of the universe. We are the universal story. But I have one more question. What is each of our individual story that draws us to be members of this universal congregation at this point in the universal story? Can the answer be as well from the beginning of the universe? Deepak Chopra thinks so, for he wrote, "There are no extra pieces in the universe. Everyone is here because he or she has a place to fill, and every piece must fit itself into the big jigsaw puzzle." We are members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Quad Cities. There's our call. And it calls us to fill a place in the universal scheme that is life itself. This call is to keep growing, to live the principles of universalism, to add our efforts to complete the jigsaw puzzle which is as yet unfinished. But one day, will reveal the lion laying down with the lamb. I believe there is no religious faith, no greater spiritual opportunity in any other organization than we, this community of Universalists, to perpetuate and carry on the vision of the mission as it was intended to be. The universe knows that, or we wouldn't be here. You know that, or you wouldn't be here. And that is why we are here. I will end with a quote whose source is unknown, but I'm thinking it came from the universe itself. It states, "We all place our story into the stories of billions of years, but how we live our story will affect the next billion years. All the powers in the universe are already ours, and there is a choice. You can put your hands before your eyes and cry out that it is dark, or you can embrace the call and be the force that transforms that darkness into light. What we choose to do will be the next chapter in an individual story, in our congregation story, and in the universal story." Catherine McNecht says, "Every time I witness a strong person, I want to know, what darkness did you conquer in your story? Mountains do not arise without earthquakes. We are recovering from an earthquake. Let's go build a mountain, damn it. Let that be our story." Amen. I'm not done. Where am I? Where? Gates, where am I? Oh yeah, the closing song. Now here's an irony. It was never intended to say, "My lie flows on Enna Stream." It's my life. But as we reflected upon that, we have a choice. We can pretend we're something we're not, and we can lie about it, and that's going to go on into the next story. So let's sing it about life. Join with me in the words written in the order of service as we extinguish the flame. We extinguish
this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we bear in our hearts until we are together again.
the closing words. I don't even know where they came from, but here it is. It's called The Call. Call from the past. The voice of creation calls to us from the heights and width of the universe, from the birth of stars, from the formation of earth, to sea creatures venturing onto land, of things that walk and stand, of flowers, of scent, of trees. We are called. Our stories stretch back to the first explosion, the first connection to us, all travelers of this universe. We have inherited the unfinished labor of creation and the gifts it so generously has bestowed. We are called to continue the work. The call from the present. Creation has told us its story till now, and we who were unfolded into this time and place will continue the story. We will weave our story of creation's call in our responses to how we accept the universe's template to grow and stretch, expand and connect. It will be a response to the story of creation right here, right now, of how do we receive the gifts we have been given, and how do we pass on the gifts to others. We are called to sustain the work. A call from the future. The voices of those who will be call to us. A reminder of who we need to be for them. In the weaving of our story to the web of life, we must remember that we must not cut the strings, for there are others coming after us. Others with tender hearts and strong wills, with creative determination, those who will be, live in the house of tomorrow. Their vision escapes us, yet we are called to prepare the road, to leave behind possibility and foundations upon which they will build a better tomorrow. We are called to pass on this work. Now, may you all be safe. May you all be peaceful. May you all be healthy. May you all be eased. And may your story continue. Amen.